The volume estimator. So normally what you're going to download is going to look roughly the same as this, right? There's some highlights and don't worry about that. So instead of using that standalone form, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the volume estimator that is actually in the budget so that you'll sort of understand why are we doing this. And so big picture is that it's impossible for somebody to come and go, well, how many units do you think you're going to sell a month? I'm kind of like, right? Let me make up a number that's going to sound impressive. And that just doesn't really work in the real world. In the real world, what we need to do is understand exactly how many units of something that we're going to sell and when we're going to sell it. Because what we need to be able to do is match budget for labor and in some cases inventory with when that demand occurs. And so I created this because I wanted us to begin thinking at a very a granular level. Like, okay, what are you going to do between 6 a.m. and 12 p.m.? Some businesses are going to be like nothing. But let's say, for example, you have a bar, right? You run a neighborhood bar, and you got three kinds of products, right? You're going to sell beer, well, and that would be like, and you could change that, change it to beer, and we're going to have well drinks, right? And then we're going to have, premium drinks. You can change these to whatever you want, right? And if it starts to get too crowded, you just go up here between A and B and double click and it'll open it up for you. And so let's say, what time do you open? Well, I open at 6 a.m., right? And I don't know, do people drink beer at 6 a.m.? I'm assuming if I'm drinking, I'm probably going to, and it's 6 a.m., it's probably going to be beer and or Bloody Marys, right? I think the last time I drank at 6 a.m. was World Cup, and that's because the U.S. games were being played, and it was like 7 a.m. and we had to show up at the bar early so we could get a seat, and we figured, well, we're at a bar, so let's assume you're 6 to 12 p.m. and it's a Monday, and you're like, well, how many beers am I really going to sell? Am I going to sell 10? And maybe on Tuesday I'm going to sell 10, and maybe hump days I'm going to sell 15, right? Because and Thursday I'm going to sell 18 because people are getting a little bit more excited. It's almost Friday, and then Friday I'm going to sell 25, and Saturday maybe back to 10, and I don't know. You're going to have to do the research on this, right? And I'm still a bar, but now I'm between 12 and 3, and in the middle of that is happy hour, and maybe like I'm going to sell 20 beers, right? You plug in these numbers. I don't care what they are. And let's say, you expect that, 6 to 12 total, you're going to sell 10 beers, but you think right around 9 o'clock, people are going to be like, hey, it's Bloody Mary time, right? So you're going to sell 10 Bloody Marys during this same time period. And on the premium drink, no premium drinks. Premium drinks, maybe you're going to start selling those at 6 o'clock. So maybe you're going to have 20 premium drinks that you're going to sell. What is it? This is really up to you to spend time. I mean, you just got to do some back of napkin scratching, right? And sort of think about it in between 12 and obviously you're not going to be open until 6 a.m., but you're going to 12 to 2. And, maybe, that's when people start leaning in, right? So maybe it's going to be 30 between the hours here, right? And I don't know what it's going to be. This is all for you to figure out. But, this is big picture, right? We need to be able to, and if you need to change these hours so that it's more along the lines of what you think your actual business is going to do, awesome, right? You change these time frames. It doesn't matter to me, right? What I'm looking at more than anything else are these numbers here, because what it's going to do is it's going to calculate daily numbers and weekly orders and monthly numbers. And the reason that's important is that then this feeds into your income variables. So what I want you to be able to do is that as you're dreaming about units, that you're plugging this in, and then it rolls over to help fill in the rest of your sheet. So let me clear these, and let's say, for example, you are a daycare center. We've got a great certificate with early childhood development. So let's say, for example, you've got your daycare center, and you got regular. I don't know what the hours are for regular. how to spell regular, obviously. Regular, there we go. And then we're going to say midday. I don't know, I'm making stuff up. And then we're going to have some evening kids. So then this is where you could use 24 hours, right? Because you're going to be charging weekly, for example. So you could say how many kids, you're going to have 12 kids and a week, right? And that here's going to say 12 a week. And it works out to about 51 or 52 units a month, kid units, right? Where you're going to get paid. But let's assume that you got, some of these kids that are going to come midday, right? Mom drops them off or dad drops them off at 12 o'clock so he can go to that yoga class, right? So let's say, you're going to have four of those. Let me back up, sorry. And so those are four regular kids. You just plug that number in here, and then maybe you're going to have, six that are evening kids. And the reason I'm putting those numbers here on Friday is because at the end of the week you get paid on Friday. I mean, maybe this is not midday, maybe this is weekends. I don't know. But at the end of the day, the data that you plug in here will feed into the income variables. And then there's obviously the longer presentation that talks about what do you do now. So you really want to take this seriously and, and give your business some thought, right? Like if you're up, I've got a bunch of students that are, wanting to open up salons and do hair and nails and all that stuff. It's like awesome, right? You're going to probably start around 10 o'clock in the morning. So the 10 to 12 still works. I mean, you could go, how many hair things can you do maybe Monday you're closed, right? And on Tuesdays, right, in between the hours of 10 and 12, can you do one, right? And then, maybe you do one and one and one. Assuming it's female hair, guy hair, you could do like four, right? Yeah, and then between 12 and 6, that's your money time. You do three more. And this is where I just need you to really be thoughtful. Like, maybe you don't work on Sunday. You need 2 days off. That's hard work, man. I just had a student come in into class, and she said that she had her hair done, it was beautiful, and she said it took 6 hours. And I'm just thinking, man, that poor lady that had to do that was just brutal. So maybe you could do three more, right? And maybe this is what your week looks like. You do 7 jobs a day, and then maybe you got some coloring or whatever that you do. You got some coloring, and maybe in between these are just short haircuts, or I don't know. This is you figuring out your business, right? And how many can you really realistically do? Because then this is going to flow over to your income variables, and this is going to be your, um, this is going to be your, up here is going to be, okay, this is how much am I charging, right? But I'm not going to get into that because that's not what this is. So using this is super easy, and it's really designed for you to be really mindful of how many units of something you could sell during a period of time. So take your time, spend a lot of time here, because the more time you spend here, realistically thinking about the flow of your business, it makes the other parts of the budget much easier. How many people am I really going to need? Well, if I'm only going to sell 10 beers, you know what? Maybe it's me, and I'm going to be doing my accounting during the same time that I'm selling 10 beers. I don't need somebody, but maybe if I'm a bar and now maybe 6 o'clock is when I finally need to bring in another person and I got to have somebody on the bar back. You just need to really stop and sort of sketch out, what do I think I'm going to need in terms of volume, and then that drives your labor. So I hope this was helpful.